Gary. Appreciate you coming out.
My pleasure.
Mm-hmm. So we always kick these off with like an opening question that's kind of humorous as well. Like, what did you find more difficult, climbing the world's tallest freestanding mountain or navigating the RCO process on a variance in Philly?
That is a great question. And I would say without question, the RCO process in Philadelphia is a more difficult one.
Yeah. More draining process, I'm sure.
No question.
Tell us just real quick about that experience. I know you did it with several others, and why you decided to climb that mountain.
It was Mount Kilimanjaro, right?
Right.
Correct. It was Kilimanjaro, and it was not my idea. So I'm on the board for Big Brothers, and one of the other board members had suggested, hey, we should do this as a fundraiser for Big Brothers. And ironically, it was on my wife's list of things that she really wanted to do. Mm-hmm. So I'm like 100% sign us up. So we signed up, ended up getting 19 people to go on it. It was the most successful fundraiser in the Independence Blue Cross region's history in terms of dollars raised, actually made. Like, so you raised over $500,000, and all of that went to the charity. So
crazy.
It was fabulous.
How long did it take to climb the mountain?
It was an 8-day journey.
I mean, that's what you have, like guides to take you up for something like that, right? I mean, it's snow at the top.
So it's funny because you're not going to be as impressed when I tell you we had 3 support people for every one person that climbed the mountain. So you're like, maybe not as good as you think, but it was amazing because they would carry everything. We had to carry a backpack with like 3 bottles of water in it and like something to put on if we got cold or warm, that kind of thing. They carried the tents, the food, I
was going to ask about the nutrition and your diet on the way. I mean, you're just hauling food up.
They are.
Yeah,
they are. Yes. But yeah, we had 3 meals a day. They cooked us stuff. It was really a wonderful, wonderful experience.
Wow. I heard a rumor that Ken carried somebody at one point, or is that true or false? Or
Ken Weller is superhuman, is what I said. It's a fact that Ken, we had one of the best climbers in the group on the last day. You don't know how the altitude when you go from 16 to 19,000 feet is going to affect you. And so what the person's idea was to actually have the trip all of a sudden, can't function, or body functions are breaking down. And so Ken and a guy named Mike Dinda, who's from First Trust Bank, they literally put her around like this and carried her, up the mountain until she was able to kind of, get it back together. It was amazing.
Jeez. It's at 19,000 feet, is that
correct?
Sounds I was like just at 13,000, and I was so lightheaded. It's actually unbelievable how much it affects you. That's crazy, 19,000 feet.
Well, what they did was they would take you to 13 and then take you to 12 back down, then take you to 15.
So you acclimate, sort of it's like scuba diving a little bit?
Exactly. They say, climb high, sleep low. So they would bring you up and then bring you back down.
Nice.
Did you personally feel anything, like yourself? Like
a little bit. I mean, that last day, if I had to help like Ken did, I wouldn't have been able to do it.
Well, you get tired really, really quickly, right? It's part of the altitude.
Exactly.
That's wild.
Honestly, I could do, I feel like, a whole podcast just on that, but we're here to talk about real estate, so.
Yeah.
So just jumping right in, I told you in our email group, I've always admired the How Group from afar. You guys just do so much. I mean, you do general contracting for other people's jobs. You do your own development deals. You guys do sales. So I'm just curious, did you start with the intention to get into that, or did it sort of just happen?
It sort of just happened. And it's one of those things where you don't know what you know, right? Now that looking back on it, maybe we shouldn't have gotten into all the things that we got into, but it was one of those things where, so we started in the mortgage business like Josh.
Yeah.
Right? And
really?
So, still are in the mortgage business. And we run a mortgage platform for a bank called Mid-Penn Bank, which is a regional bank out of Harrisburg area. And what happened was, when we had the last financial crisis, we basically were our own mortgage banker, and we ended up having to partner with the bank because you couldn't get warehouse lines. It was a very fluid time in the business, and that left me with nothing to do because all the work that I did, the bank now took over. So we said, well, what are you going to do? And I said, all right, well, why don't I go out and try and buy some real estate? so we can have a retirement plan because we're pretty much self-employed guys, and nobody's giving us a 401k.
Yeah, right. This is 2008.
Yeah, about 2008.
That's when you decided to go and start buying.
And got lucky, right? This is not knowing what you don't know. We're buying at the bottom of the market.
Right.
We're buying into an explosive growth phase in Philadelphia, and just by luck, not this is what we planned.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't around. I wasn't, our business wasn't up and running in 2008. I was in 8th grade, but I remember, every time I talk to people, I always ask how that went, because if you made it through that, it's sort of like a rite of passage. Like, you should all have tattoos. You're in this club now, you understand what happened. But at that time, wasn't it sort of like people didn't know which direction it was going to go? You had some doomsday people that were like, nope, this is it. We're going to create a new money supply, and we're going to get back to living in huts.
I think all that's true for us. It was just like, we believe in real estate, and we're buying real estate at good prices. This math works really well for us. Like, we started buying at Temple, at that time, and there was, like a block or two off of campus, there just was no housing. And that kind of propelled us through the process. And so, we were doing really solid real estate deals.
So, like, for you guys, you say I noticed you guys have like 4 partners, right? Is that kind of how it's always been? And then, like, how does that work kind of from a leadership perspective? Is it like 4 heads making decisions, or can you kind of talk about that?
It's funny that you asked that question, because I always said that we should write a book on or on partnerships, having had a partnership since 1998, right? So whatever that is, 25 years. That's hard to do, right? Specifically with 4 people in different life cycles, and just different things going on. But
most people have 25 partners in 4 years rather than 4 in 25.
That's exactly right. And I say all the time, most people aren't partner people, right? And here's how I would tell you. If you want to be a good partner, this is what you should do, right? Because this has happened to us. There's always a point where one of the different people is the weak link in the group, okay? And if right? So when we first got started, let's say one of my partner's wives might have said, well, I'm looking at what this person's doing, and I'm looking at what you're doing, and they're not worth the same amount of money. You should get paid more money. And if your answer isn't, hey, look, that's not the way we keep score. Here's how we keep score: effort. All I want to be in business with is people that are putting effort in. Because there's going to be a time where Josh makes a good decision that I wouldn't have made, and that makes us a lot of money. And if I try to keep score on who's bringing in the most revenue, I shouldn't be in a partnership.
Right. For sure. I mean, I've seen that true with mine. Myself and my business partner have been partners now for 11 years, 5 in real estate. And sometimes he's the producer. Sometimes I'm bringing a bigger deal to the table. And over the aggregate, 1 + 1 has got us to 5 rather than 2. And that's why it works out.
Do you guys then, like, in terms of decision making and things, is there, you've gone into so many phases. Has there been an ideas guy and an executor, or somebody that you think is the decision maker on particular things, or like, how's that kind of been working for you guys? Just curious.
That's another great question. You guys are pros at this job. Hopefully you'll like the answer, but we currently run off a system called EOS. I don't know if you're familiar with that system, but it's called the Entrepreneur's Operating System, and it sets up a structure for companies. And in that system, they have what they call a visionary, and then they have an integrator. So the visionary's job is to come up with all the crazy ideas, and then the integrator's job is to go, whoa, you just gave me 10 ideas. I'm going to take these 2 that I think are really good, and we're going to work on those. And then when you 2 weeks later come back with 10 other ideas, it's my job to tell you, hey, we're working on these 2.
Sort of a push and pull. Like, sometimes you're pushing, sometimes you're pulling.
Correct. And so what's interesting is, as our company has grown from 4 guys sitting in the basement to 150 employees, one of the things that happens is you outgrow your ability to do these certain jobs. So my one partner was sitting in that integrator seat, and I was sitting in the visionary seat. And you have to be open and honest. And what we said is, listen, I don't think you're qualified for this job with this number of employees. I just don't think you can hold people accountable. You're a great guy. You work really hard. You want to do the right thing for people. But when you have 147 people that you have to consistently make sure they're hitting their goals and their objectives, that's not a skill set that's your highest and best skill set. We need to remove you from this position.
So you can't have an ego if you're going to be in partnership for that long.
Correct.
That's a heavy thing to tell someone. This episode is sponsored by Axe Philly. Axe specializes in the development of boutique apartment complexes under 10 units and custom renovations of unique single-family homes. The team at Axe found a competitive advantage in the marketplace by going vertical, taking acquisitions, construction, and property management in-house, and they're just starting to offer those services to a select group of clients. You can follow along with their progress by subscribing to Philadelphia's most transparent weekly newsletter on their website, www.axephilly.com/blog. That's www.axephilly.com/blog, BLOG. Thank you. Now let's get back to the episode.
So did you put then someone else in that role or multiple people in that role? How did that work then with your vision board?
Yeah, so we hired an outside person. We did a national search to hire somebody as this integrator. Most people would know that as a COO, right?
Right.
And we went on a national search. It's good for us that this EOS system that we use has EOS recruiters, so they know the system, they understand what we're looking for, and they were able to find us a candidate that we hired.
Nice.
And brought in.
So EOS is like it's a national organization that you guys are plugged into, and you utilize their systems.
Correct.
Oh, okay, cool. I never heard of that. I'll have to check that one out. Sounds pretty cool.
It's a great system. I recommend it to everybody.
Yeah, I made a note of that.
Yeah, it sounds like
operating system.
Yeah, it sounds like it could be. I could think of it almost working for any industry, really.
I want to circle back just real quick because I'm curious about how you guys. So you started in the mortgage business, then you started buying properties yourselves, and I mean, did it just naturally evolve into you brought construction in-house and then you started doing it for other people? And for some context, like we actually just did this during COVID. We decided to just make our project when everything was shut down. We're like, all right, let's get our GC license. And over the past 2.5 years, I've been building a construction company, and we just took on our first outside client like 3 months ago to just try to like balance the today cash flows with the tomorrow wealth building. And it's difficult. It's a totally different game. Like it's a separate company.
No question. And I think, our progression is probably exactly what you said, which is one of my partners, ironically, when we started doing this, we were, prior to doing it like as a real business, he would go out and buy a property here and there on the side, and he would manage the construction and fix it up and that kind of stuff. And what we started to realize is that he was really good at the construction piece of it. So we're like, this is great. And so we started building like duplexes down at Temple, and he would manage them as our own GC. And then, as you know, it's very hard to find GCs. So as we started growing, other people would come to us and ask us to build, and we could use that cash flow to then invest in the new real estate deals that we wanted to do. And it was a great thing for us. It helped propel our business, and it helps us today because people come to us and say like, hey, look, would you build for me? And we would say, well, we'll build for you if we're part of the deal. We want to, and we'll put money in, we'll do whatever, but we want to be part of the equity so the alignment is right from the beginning.
So whenever you guys are building for
interesting.
someone else, you're taking a piece of the project too.
Just recently. It took us a while to get there.
Yeah.
To the point where we
But just because you had to develop the credibility?
Because I don't think we realized that, well, no, if I back up, it's because we needed the cash flow in the beginning to subsidize the other businesses, so I couldn't.
That's why we started.
Yeah.
Just because of the cash flow. We're like, we just needed an opportunity to generate quicker cash flow than like a 12-month flip.
Correct.
Was the equity then, the reasoning for that was also like a vetting process, but also just based on your time? Because I'm assuming you probably get a lot of people coming to you, right? And you want to only take on a couple different opportunities. The equity is a way where you can make more kind of thing?
Yes. I mean, definitely. Like, if you think about your construction business, the reason you're doing it right now is the right reason to do it. But let's say you're 10 years down the road and now your properties are making good money, and you're like, okay, well, I don't necessarily need the cash flow from the real estate or from the construction as much. And the cash flow from the construction is not taxed great, right?
Yeah,
so
for sure.
If you could get equity in deals on the GP side versus maybe some of that, cash flow you would have made, that's probably a good trade-off. And then it tells you I'm only doing I'm only building for somebody that I want to be partners with.
Yeah.
And that's
Totally.
a great litmus test, right?
Totally. For
Okay.
sure. Yeah, the wrong client is a nightmare to have. It's for sure.
That's correct. And we've had a lot of tremendous clients,
Mm-hmm.
and we have some bad ones.
Yeah.
And when you see that bad one, then you know,
Takes as much energy as 5 good ones.
When you're interviewing, or maybe it's not, maybe that's the wrong word, like when you're looking at those partnerships, I know you mentioned the financial side, but what do you guys look in a partner that you're going to do a deal with? Like, is there a vetting process? Do you have certain questions you ask? I mean, I'm sure you check into their background. What does that look like for you?
so I'm just going to give you 2 quick answers on that. We have a spreadsheet that we use at a deal level that says, okay, how risky do we think it is to build for this person? Okay, what does their financial capacity look like? Who have they built? Who's built for them before? What do they have to say about them? How big is the job in relation to a normal job we would do? And we score every job that we do as it's right in our wheelhouse as a job we would love to do, to this is really risky and we better have a good reason to do it.
It's almost like an insurance actuary, like assigning a risk rating to a job.
Correct. So we try and do that to take emotion out of the equation, right? Mm-hmm. And then if we get through that part and we say, okay, this is a deal that we would want to do, then I'm just sitting down with you and going, do I like this person? Do I, like if I call this guy and say, hey, we have a problem, we need to work through it together, does my gut tell me we're going to be able to work through it, or does my gut tell me we're not? And it's that simple.
Fair
you don't
enough.
have to.
We've seen that now. Like a lot of people really operate a lot by their gut. And I think it's kind of potentially the X factor that, differentiates between a good operator and someone who's maybe an average operator.
Yeah.
Something interesting we've learned just through doing this. It's
Yeah.
cool to see. So my perspective on that is like with any deal, there's 3 or 4 things, right? There's the deal, there's building the deal, there's the money for the deal, and then there's the person who understands how to position it. Like that's how I look at it, is those are the 4 pieces of, I guess pieces of the pie that are different value propositions in a deal. Let's say that like I just had a deal. Would the Howe Group partner with us and just say, hey, you brought the deal, so that's, 10% equity because this is the value that you're bringing. We're taking the rest of this.
Exactly. So not surprisingly, we have a spreadsheet for that too.
Nice.
Where we have everything broken down on the spreadsheet and say, hey, if you came to me with the deal, I'd send you the spreadsheet. I say, check off the boxes of what you want to do, and check off and then that'll leave.
Like a literal spreadsheet, like it's quantitative.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So to your point, raising the equity is worth 25% of our side. Okay, so if you raise the equity, whatever we get as the GP, that's worth 25% of it. Signing on a debt is worth 25% of it. So if you brought me a deal and said, well, I'm going to raise the equity and I'm going to sign on the debt, I need you to fund the upfront entitlements, I need you to work through the zoning with the neighborhood, I need you to do these things, and that other stuff total up to 50%, then we would split it. You would get 50, I would get 50.
So you just point to the spreadsheet and you're like, well, here's what we're doing, here's what you're doing. That's a good way to do it.
And I'll tell you
It's not subjective.
Yeah.
Right. And by the way, I tell people all the time, we made this spreadsheet up. We decided we thought this stuff was worth this.
Yeah, right.
It doesn't necessarily make it right, so you certainly could come back and propose something different. But what I don't want to do is, hey, we do our first deal together, and you think this is worth X. Then we go to do our second deal. Now we're negotiating again through this whole process. It's like, I don't want to do that. I want everybody to know kind of
This is
how
where
we
you stand.
value it.
Yeah.
That makes total sense.
So I'm a little curious now, kind of transitioning. This is something that's kind of been passionate for me. Through BIA and some other things, you created this blueprint for affordable housing that you proposed to the city, and you basically worked through that. Can you kind of explain what that looks like, and then like what was the response from the city when you created this? Because it was very impressive and another spreadsheet, So love to hear your thoughts on that.
Noticing a trend on the
Yeah,
spreadsheets.
as what I said is I love the spreadsheet more than the actual building itself.
Yeah,
So I am a super nerd. But no, I can tell you that, look, the process is always the same with anything, which is, there is a need for affordable housing, right? And so we can sit here and stamp our feet and tell you that, like, what you want to do doesn't work and this, that, and the other thing. What we decided to do was just create some tools and say, look, just like anything else, there's 4 or 5 major drivers that are going to make a decision on whether a deal can get done or can't get done. okay? And I'm not asking the city to have to front all of it. We need to bring a bunch of different people to the table to be able to, to kind of fill this gap that gets created to deliver affordable housing. And so we said to them, like, hey, look, here's what the tax abatement's worth. If you want to see what that's worth, check that box off, and it'll change the returns on the deal. If we can get an interest-only loan versus a amortizing loan, let me show you how much that saves. So my whole premise to the city was, on the for rent side, where you're going to take people and cultivate them to become homeowners, the people that aren't ready yet, you need to fill that box in. And the number one driving tool to do that is getting better financing terms. So I'm not saying the city, you need to do a better job. I'm saying we need to go to the banks and these people together and work out a better deal, right? And this is a different approach than just saying, hey, the numbers don't work.
Right.
Like,
I mean, the construction costs are kind of just what they cost. And then, I mean, the city has a ton of land. Isn't that another opportunity for
like 6,000, I think is what I read.
I mean, there's a ton of vacant properties.
well,
So there's the financing, which you can definitely get more competitive on. You can save some money, which would drive down our costs. Then you'd be happy to pass that on to the consumer. But I feel like, from my perspective, the land is like by far.
So it's interesting. It depends on how you look at it, right? If you're doing out sale projects, the city's turnkey program, the 5149 kind of, get land from the city for $1. 49% of it is market rate, 51% of it is affordable, has been a tremendous success. The city is issuing, land RFPs. People are taking them down and delivering affordable housing at a greater rate than the city has ever done. The program is fabulous.
Yeah.
Okay, so that piece, and Mo Rushdie led the charge on that and got that going, and now everybody is taking advantage of it, and it is a tremendous program.
Nice.
Do you think the city then, because I always hear, you don't hear this stuff outside of these types of rooms or settings. Do you think the city could do a better job of letting people know these types of programs exist and, let them know that they're actually working on it too? They're not just sitting on their hands.
Well, I mean, did the city respond favorably when you approached them with this program?
Yes, I mean, we've had great response from the city on the 5149. My math is terrible today, but so that, I don't know how the city markets that and gets that out there. I can tell you that the RCOs are doing a good job of bringing buyers in, right? So there is this kind of the neighborhood groups, the developers, the city kind of all working together, and it's starting to work really, really well. So I think that's good. If you went and talked to the people on the other side of it and say, well, that's great, but the city has a finite amount of land, and once they're rid of that land, what's your plan to deliver affordable housing then? That's why we want land trusts, and that's why we want other programs. So my perspective on it is, okay, well, tell me what you want to accomplish, right? And if that's what you want to accomplish, which is preserve home ownership that's affordable when the city's out of land, well, we need to come up with a different plan for that. And we can work towards that. That's not an unreasonable goal, okay? But you have to balance that with the fact that if I sell you a house at an affordable rate, the reason you want to be a homeowner and the reason that you want to take on the responsibility of fixing that house and signing for the mortgage is that as the equity grows in it, that you get to take advantage of it. So on the one side, you want to keep it affordable, which I get, but on the other side, you're punishing the person that bought the house and not letting them take advantage of the growth and wealth that comes in home ownership.
It's an interesting perspective.
Right? So how do you balance both of those two things together? So these issues are always way more complicated than you wanted to make them. So I'll give you an idea that I heard. This was from Greg Heller, who who used to work for the city and is now at a consulting organization called Guidehouse. And we said, well, what if we made duplexes? And so Josh buys the duplex. He's the affordable housing person that needs that. He lives on the first floor. Second floor, he rents out for whatever he rents it out for. That second floor rent can go up to whatever it goes up to. Josh's unit has got to stay affordable forever. So Josh still gets to take advantage of equity growth because the unit upstairs gets more and more rent, becomes worth more and more money. The unit downstairs is always going to be at an affordable rate. So maybe this is a solution that says, okay, you can take advantage of this while still not running out of land because the unit below will always be affordable.
Interesting.
So these are the kind of ideas and things that you want to work through. Now, there's still challenges with that idea. What's the challenge? Is Josh really ready to be a landlord and have to collect rent from somebody above him? So now
and then also do maintenance on someone else's unit.
Yeah.
You know, not just his own.
So now that's the sticking point. Well, how do we solve that issue? But we're having good conversation is the point.
That's a good idea. I thought about that.
So through these conversations, you know, you've obviously had a number of conversations with the city, you know, BIA president, you've experienced a lot of different roles. How has your relationship with the city council changed in your mind, and, you know, your perspective also on the process with politics and real estate?
So here's what I would say to you. I think we can clearly see that there's some ideological differences, okay? And I don't know, like before, I think we would try and change those ideological differences and try and say, hey, this is why your ideology is wrong and mine's right. And now I think we've changed our position to, it doesn't matter who's wrong or right. I think a certain way, you think a certain way. The issue is still the same issue. How do we deliver housing to this group of people without slowing down the city's growth, okay? And when you change that conversation to that, you can have a more productive conversation. If you're asking me, am I frustrated with, you know, a lot of the bills that are being passed and things that I think don't work and are taking the city backwards? Yes. I can clearly tell you that is true. But what I'm not willing to do is just throw my hands up and then say, okay, well, this is unworkable. We got to go back in every day, put our hard hat on and say, okay, you didn't like that idea. What about this idea? Right? And continue to show up at the table and continue to not take no for an answer and try and solve these problems together. Because no matter, I might have the best idea in the world. If I can't get you to buy off on it, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, so just like not invalidating someone else's idea and their experience, and then just trying to help them to understand your perspective and find a win-win solution.
Right. But then what's the second thing we did, right? The second thing we're doing, right, is, and this isn't BIA specific, but there were members of the BIA that formed a Philly for Growth PAC and said, look, there's council people that we just disagree with ideology-wise, and so instead of complaining, what we're going to do is we're going to try and see if there's candidates that are more aligned with our ideology that we can get elected in the next election. So we're going to still work with the people that are in while they're in, but at the same time, we're going to take a more aggressive approach to trying to make sure that the people that are in running the city, you know, are better on the issues that are important to us.
Is there anything that could happen that would make you just actually throw your hands up and be like, no, I'm done?
Interesting question there.
Well, I don't think it would be that I would throw my hands up and say I'm done. I think what could happen is if the city loses population and now my buildings don't make any money and the bank takes them all back from me, then I'm not going to have anything to do. Right? I could be kicked out. Right?
Fair enough. Nice. You're willing to die on the hill.
One of the questions we thought was really interesting, and I think a lot of people, younger professionals in their career, just starting to network within the last 5 to 10 years, you know, I'm curious your response to this. Like, have your relationships with these influential city politicians or RCOs, you know, that come to you because of do they come to you because of the size of your company or because of the groups that you're involved in? And then there's kind of a follow-up question, but I'll see kind of what you think on that.
So RCOs typically won't come to us, period, right? They're not coming to us to solicit advice. We've taken the approach that, hey, why would the development community only talk to RCOs when they have deals? We should talk to them when we don't have deals and just say to them, well, tell me why that's important to you. And so I went to a meeting in Parkside the other day, and they said, hey, we have a vision. We want to deliver 100 affordable units, you know, in Parkside in the next 2 years. And I said, okay, well, let me ask you this question. Like, I don't have any project in Parkside. I'm just trying to bring developers to Parkside to help you. If that 100 affordable units came with 300 market rate units, and you got 400 total units, 100 of which are affordable, would that be okay? Yes. Great. So it informs two things. Like, people are way less Like if I came in day one and said, I want to do a project that's 100 units and 25% of them are going to be affordable, they might say, well, that's not a good enough affordability rate and push back on the project. But now, since I have no project in the game and I'm asking questions and not designed to trap somebody, but just to say, hey, when your emotions aren't involved and you're having a conversation about what would be acceptable and what would not be acceptable, we get better answers. And then therefore, when we do bring developers in, we can say, hey, they're okay with this. And now here's what you need to do if you want to develop here. And so the more of that approach we can take with the RCOs, I think the better off we are.
What about like, so to take that question and then just focus on like the city council side of that, like, do you think you have more influence now because of the size of your company or the size of your network?
So I think the BIA has more influence. A specific project for Gary Jonas and the Howe Group, it's still the same process. They still have to go through the RCO. So we're doing a big project in Wynwood, which is in Curtis Jones District. And we didn't get Curtis involved, until we had enough meetings with the community. We got the community. It took us a year to just sit down with the community. And here's what we found that works for us. And so people think like, oh, no, you're getting special treatment because you have a bigger company. And that's not the way it works. I have not seen that. I think that was an old guard way of working. I don't think that works that way now. But here's what we do. So when we went to the community first time, they hated our project, right? This project's terrible. Okay. And the conversation was dominated on the Zoom call, because, it's the middle of COVID, about parking. So I get off the phone assuming that parking is the big issue and I need to reduce my unit count to provide more parking. But what we did is we sent a survey to everybody and we said, rank these issues for us: parking, green space, and gave them a list of.
Like you literally just sent out mail to the RCO.
We didn't send out mail. We sent a Survey Monkey thing that went to everybody that was on the Zoom call. And then we got the responses back. And what we found out was that the thing that was the most important to them was green space, because it was close to Fairmount Park. And they wanted it to look and mimic a certain thing. So, by understanding what the majority wants, not the people that are talking the loudest, then you can now model your project to that. And after 2 or 3 more meetings, it was like, oh, we were heard.
Wow, that's a good idea.
Like sometimes it's sort of a loud minority versus a quiet majority.
Correct. And everybody just wants to be heard. And then say, hey, I heard you, and I tried to do this because you told me you want this. And generally with that approach, you can get there. We got, I think, 279 units approved on a lot that by right was 40 single-family houses.
Whoa, nice. That's a great idea. I'm stealing that. The Survey Monkey. I like that.
Yeah, well, you don't even, here's the thing. At the BIA, we're trying to create this process for people and say, hey, these are the things that are working for our members. Anybody that goes here should do this. We have an affordable housing committee. We have, we're trying to assign people to all the different RCOs and say, go meet with them without a project, take the survey information, get as much information as we can to find out what would be helpful to the community, and then we can, help members navigate this process a lot smoother and a lot easier.
That's awesome. Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah, the RCO is not an easy process to navigate, or I should say like a variance process, right? The ZBA and the RCO. So that'd be super helpful. But you're obviously like invested very deeply in Philly. Can you just make the case for us for Philadelphia over the next 20 years?
Greatest city in the world.
Good place to start.
I think the case is super easy for the next 20 years, right? I just looked at a chart that CBRE did and gave to us, and it showed housing affordability, right? And we're at the top of the list, right, in terms of housing affordability on the East Coast. But the other thing is, if you're in the apartment business, what it showed is the cost of home ownership in Philadelphia, the delta between home ownership and rental in Philadelphia is really big, which means that it costs way more to own than to rent. And so if you're on the rental side of the market, right, that's good news for you because people are going to have to rent for longer periods of time.
Right.
And, you're seeing a little less building now, so I think there's going to be some pent-up demand for any new construction stuff that's happening.
Yeah.
So I feel like the city is good on both sides of that equation from a housing standpoint. I think we're really positioned really, really well versus every other major market on the East Coast. And so now the second piece is, what do we got to do? We got to make it a place that people want to bring jobs, right? And so that's the piece that we got to work on. And
yeah, I was just going to say, is there any, like, that's kind of an optimistic take, any major concerns you have with Philadelphia in the next 5 to 10 years?
I think everybody has the same concern, crime.
Yeah.
Right? If crime's higher. The last time crime was close to this high was in the early 90s. And it's higher now, but not, the city felt very unsafe at that time.
That's crazy. 30 years.
And
didn't realize that.
Very unsafe now. And so that's the number one priority for everybody. It's got to be. People are not going to stay in a city where they don't feel safe.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. And priority number 2 being jobs, it sounds like, right? I mean, I pass your guys' projects all the time in West Philly. You have that big one on Walnut. It's the old school, I think it was, right?
Yeah, 4700 Walnut. Yeah.
So and then another one on Baltimore, right?
Correct.
What is that one going to be? So it's like 42nd, maybe?
Yeah, you're 42nd in Chester, but it goes Baltimore to Chester, right?
Nice.
Yeah. Well, a lot of times, this is why we changed our system, right? To, hey, we got to get equity in these deals. So a lot of these bigger deals you're seeing that we're building, and we end up making 2% on the construction that we do, and we're doing a lot of work. And we realize we're better off being in those deals. Both those deals you referenced, we don't have any ownership in those deals.
Oh, really? No.
We're just the builder for both of those.
So they're two awesome locations. I was just going to bring up like all the biomedical and the life science investments. Like they're all really high paying jobs. I was wondering if that's why you got those projects. But I guess,
I would say this. We are very, very bullish on West Philly and the University City market for the reasons that you are laying out, right? Really.
Schuylkill Yards and U City Square. And
It's funny, just now that you mentioned that, we had Carl on the pod and Carl Drainoff, and we were asking him about the 10-year tax abatement and the fact that it's been reduced and might ultimately go away. And his major thing of saying we don't need it as much as we used to was because of those life sciences, the different universities and the amount of growth in the real estate space they're ticking up. Do you kind of agree with that too, or?
So Carl plays in a very different market, right?
Yeah.
In the high-end luxury market, yeah, I 100% agree with Carl. When you get into, hey, I'm building in the neighborhoods where, somebody that's younger might want to be, and that's what they can afford, I think that tax abatement makes a big difference for them. If you buy a $400,000 house and your taxes could be $5,000 or they could be $1,000, full abatement they're $1,000. No abatement they're $5,000.
Yeah,
that's a lot of money for somebody
sure.
in trying to determine the affordability of a house.
Now, do you think this switch is permanent, going from the full to the half, essentially half?
So it certainly. That is there. The good news is there's a bill that was introduced that if you deliver a certain percent of affordable, you can have the old 10-year tax abatement.
Oh, nice.
So if you can deliver 30% of your units at 60% of area median income, you can then get the full tax abatement.
Do you think that'll be passed, or it's already been?
It's been introduced in little slivers of the city. Our understanding is that it's going to get passed. That there's going to be more council people. They're going to put parts of their district in there where they'd like to see more affordability. So it's a tool. It's a tool in the toolbox that could be very beneficial.
Yeah, because I know from just Mortgage 101, like qualifying anything where something changes, like a grant program, an abatement, anything that is, less than 5 years, you're qualified on the full amount, not the, even though it's, you're getting several years of benefit, they still have to qualify you. So I don't know how many other people know that,
What does that mean?
So if I have a program that's, let's say, less than 5 years, I am qualified on the full amount of the taxes, not, what it would, not the reduced amount.
Like you're saying if you have 3 years left in an abatement, for instance?
Yeah, so you would be qualified on the full amount, which, you could argue whether it makes sense or not, but the fact is when there was a 10-year abatement, it was okay to qualify on if it was $1,000, you were qualified on that $1,000, but when on the reduced amount, it affects qualification. So, for those of the people that are, rates going up, other things like that, barely squeezing in these houses. Every penny counts. So I'm not sure if the city fully understood that when, looking at that. And obviously things have changed because back then rates were lower, but it's interesting.
Yeah, we're in a totally different environment, which brings me to the most annoying question I've heard, but I'm not going to stop asking it because I'm curious. What are your 2023 market predictions for the real estate market in 2023 and beyond?
So I've been telling everybody this year, 2023 is the year of making no money. So, it's about trying to just be able to pay your bills and get through it, is my opinion.
So you're optimistic.
I will tell you what I'm optimistic about, though, right?
Mm-hmm.
Here's what I'm optimistic about. I think that you're going to see that material costs are going to come back down, which will help the cost of construction. I think that land cost is going to come back down.
Mm-hmm.
And so you'll start to be able to see deals start to work again. I mean, the guys that work with us now, they're underwriting deals, and there's not one deal they underwrite that works.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like scratching their head, and they're like, I don't know what to do. These deals don't work. And I'm like, right, you can do that math 27 times. It's still not going to work.
Mostly because of interest rates or just costs in general, or
Both.
Yeah.
Yeah, the costs are up significantly, probably.
So you think
30%.
construction is going to come back?
Well,
That's what we've been saying too. Our construction's 30% higher than it was 2 years ago. It's not like an 8% inflation situation. There's something else going on in the world of construction.
it's correct. And so we believe that you'll see material costs come back down.
Just because of supply chain?
Yeah.
Like you think they're higher because of supply chain constraints, not like generalized inflation?
Correct. Like if you look at wood costs, they've come back down. They're 70% lower than they were, 6 months ago.
what about labor? Do you think that'll stay the same, or?
There's less work, right?
Not right now.
Less people are building.
But all the projects are still in process. So that's the question.
So less people are buying, but not less people are currently building.
Correct.
So once those projects are finished, theoretically, that's when you might see some labor come down because some subs are going to be looking for more work.
Well, my assumption is that, I forget how many permits got pulled, but let's just call it 11,000 permits got pulled right before the abatement went away.
Yeah, crazy.
And so where it's normally 2,000 or 3,000 or something like that, that's the delta. Those numbers might not be exactly right, but let's just say it went from 2 to 10,000, and that's the right ratio. So there's all those permits out there. So the question is, how much of that stuff gets built? And if a decent amount of that stuff gets built, you're going to have a labor constraint for a while. So if it were me and I were looking at the market today, I'd be looking at material costs coming back down, and maybe not on everything, but on a lot of stuff. But labor costs I would keep static.
So where we had a 30% bump, we might see a 10% decline from that figure or something like that.
Yep.
Just
A
throwing numbers.
large portion of those permits were for like rentals and multi-use buildings, correct? Like I'm almost wondering 2023 and beyond, what's that going to do to the rental market then? Is that going to make it too oversaturated and prices maybe coming down, or the fact that it's just so much harder to buy that demand is needed?
Just the heavy bump in supply, you're saying? Is that
Yeah.
going to be too much?
Yeah.
So you're not at 5% vacancy rates right now. So you have, so you're below normalized rates, right? If you're at 2 or 3% vacancy. All the stuff that we're renting, we're not seeing a lack of demand right now. But could it happen where you get back to 5 or maybe a 7% vacancy versus the 2% vacancy that you probably see now? Yeah, I could see that happening. That's not the end of the world, right? That's just normal supply-demand fluctuation. It happens. It's just people will get nervous when they start to see it go one way. And so if the narrative is, it's going one way because, I was talking to somebody about colleges, and they're like, well, we know kids available to go to college in the Northeast, that number goes down until 2026, and then it goes back up. So same thing with this. There's always cycles.
Right.
And if the belief is, well, this is a cycle because of demographics, not people fleeing the city because of crime and, they can't make a good income, then I think you're okay. If you get too much of that other stuff happening, that's a different reasoning, and then you got problems.
So what would be your strategy then, if it does go into a little bit of a recession over 2023, 2024, and we start to see a slowing market, how would you guys, what would be your advice to people, just how you would operate and what you would kind of do hypothetically?
So a couple things. If you haven't already done it, you probably have a problem. Okay.
Oh God.
Well, no, I'm sure you're going to be okay because when I walk you through what you got to do, right?
Nice.
So when I joke and say, hey, I'm not going to make any money this year, I'm prepared that my business can operate. I can pay my bills for the next 2 years and not pay myself a dime as the owner of the company.
Right.
Okay. And if I have to do that to get through a bad cycle, I'm prepared for that because the worst cycles typically are 2 to 3 years before you start to come back out the other end and there's a lot of opportunity. So I would be saying to anybody, like, look, if you don't have a plan for how you're going to get through 2 or 3 years of really rough stuff, then it's going to be difficult for you. And so who do you see get in trouble, right? You see the person that did their first three real estate deals and then they're driving around in a Tesla. And you're like, okay, well, that's great.
There's a lot of Teslas out there right now too.
I do
so.
see a lot of Teslas. See a couple right now, and honestly.
Yeah, but think through the process, right? Because it's funny, and as an anecdotally, but when you think through the process and you go, okay, well, what happens? Like, and I was talking to somebody yesterday, and in your mind you go, well, I'm making this much money now. Even if it got cut in half, I'd still be okay. But it doesn't get cut in half. It goes from here to nothing, and then it goes back up, and that's where people get in trouble. Because it goes away like this. Now, the good news is if you've been building real estate up for years, I'm saying my operating business is not going to make any money. My properties that generate cash flow are still going to pay me, but I've got, 14, 15 years of building that up. So I'm going to be okay through that, even if my operating companies don't make any money.
Right.
But if you're a young developer that you need to get through deal 1 to pay for deal 2 and to pay for your stuff, and now you can't sell deal 1 and you've got to hold on to it, and your whole plan was to flip that building, well,
You're in
now,
some trouble.
Yeah, it's going to be very difficult, right? And so, we got lucky in the time that we were in that position was a great time in the market where you might have just timed this wrong when you're getting started and it becomes a little more difficult. But I got a real estate business. I can make money over here. I can just build for some other people to kind of get through this.
So, like, if you didn't have your portfolio right now that was able to pay for your expenses, a service-based business would be where you put your focus.
Yeah, I would have to figure out how to generate cash flow from service-based stuff.
I mean, that was going to be my next question, right? Is how do you manage the short-term cash flow obligation that just naturally comes with running a company versus the reason why we're all in real estate, that long-term wealth building aspect of building a portfolio?
It's so tough, right? Because we did exactly what happens for me now is if my business in construction goes from 100 million to 70 million, well, it doesn't cost me as much money to operate that business. So all the cash that I've had to pour into that business over the years, I start to get it back. When your business is growing, you're constantly putting your money in.
Yeah, you got to float.
You got to float it. But as the business contracts, some of that cash that you've had to use to operate the business now comes back in and makes it okay, right? So there's some okay things about, hey, we got a right size of business. We grew. We probably didn't have all great employees, right? There was a constrained labor market. We grew really quick. As we right size, you start to look at it and go, oh, well, I get to keep my best people. And I get to get some of my cash back. And I get to get ready for the next cycle with all of the stuff that I learned in this cycle. So it's all how you're framing it and looking at it as long as you planned properly.
Yeah,
right?
Totally. Makes total sense. So, like, right now I think we have 10 projects, and I was saying the same thing to my business partner where when we're trying to scale back to like 5 or 6 projects, half of which would be for other people and then half for ourselves. And I'm like looking at it, and I think we're actually going to return a ton of money. But then we started digging into our books because it didn't make sense. But I guess we just didn't realize how much we were floating across all of the jobs. Do you have a better method to float rather than take your entire net worth and float it around in different construction jobs?
No, the short answer. And I'm going to tell you why, right?
Yeah.
Because your only other option is to get lines of credit, and then you're paying now 7-8% on your line of credit.
Which we did, and they're hard to manage because we'll put $50,000 out and we wait for a construction draw to pay that back. But then when the construction draw comes, maybe we only get 40, and then that 10 is lingering and we forget about it, and then you have 3 10s that go to 30.
Right, and you're paying interest to carry on that for that
Totally.
whole period of time, right? So, so that becomes difficult. What I think you really want to keep your eye on from your end is, well, how much money? Like, so this is the question I tell everybody all the time, right? So you get your tax return at the end of the year, and you're like, look how much money I made, and then you go, Well, I know how much I actually put in my bank, like in my personal bank account,
Yeah.
and that doesn't match this.
Where is it?
And it's not the taxes, it's that all that money is still in my business.
Mm-hmm.
And so when it slows down and you start to see that money there, if you were able to do it, you're able to do it because you have other sources of revenue, right? If you don't have the other sources of revenue, then you can't do that.
You have to flow it back in
You
to
gotta-
keep it rolling.
Well, you're taking it out while the business is growing. You're taking capital out to pay yourself.
Yeah, right.
And then you got to use more and more of the line of credit to float the expanding business.
Yeah.
But if you really haven't extended how much you're using on your line of credit, that means all the cash that business is making is still sitting in there, and it's going to be available to you as the business slows down. So if you're looking at your books and saying, "Wait a second, I'm starting to see more money come back in,"
Yeah.
that's why.
Yeah. Makes total sense.
You want to do this one now? Best deal.
Oh, yeah. Want to get into that?
Yeah, let's go for it.
This is something we do every single time. It's always interesting to us. But we're just curious, what would you consider was your best deal, and what would you consider is your worst deal?
Real estate wise,
Really?
Yeah, really.
Well, you know what? Both, because now that has me interested.
But yeah, you can go as in detail as you want, and it can be as subjective as you want. You define worst, you define best.
well, I'll tell you, the worst deal I ever did in my life is I invested $500,000 on the day that my daughter was born. I left the hospital, and me and my partners wrote a $500,000 check to invest in a company called wheretolive.com. And
It sounds good on its face.
and it was good. Here's the thing.
Yeah.
The technology was before, when you guys were in 8th grade, and you would go and search to buy a property, all you would get was a list of properties. And you would literally take a map out and go, well, I think I know where Haggard Street is. And you'd look on your map and try to figure out where these are. And this was the first time they could take the MLS and put it as pinpoints on a map, and then you could find them. And the guy
I mean,
had-
that's a great idea. Why is that your worst deal?
because the company went bankrupt and I lost my $500,000. So I got a zero return on that.
Just invested with the wrong people?
No, it was a good idea. It was just, it's all in the execution. And if you can't scale it, and then somebody else goes, okay, now we've reverse engineered your thing. And
Sounds like
now-
Zillow. You invested in Zillow.
Yes, we did, right? So here's the funny thing. They if you've ever heard of the Inman Connect conferences, right?
Yeah.
So the guy was one of the moderators on the Inman Connect conferences, and I went to San Francisco, and in the hallway presenting at the time was Zillow, and the guy from Trulia was sitting behind me, and he was like pitching his idea, like in the audience, and I'm sitting there like this, and I go, that's never going to be a idea.
Stupid name like that. There's no way.
Meanwhile,
What is a
invested-
Trulia?
Exactly. So that was probably the worst investment I've ever made.
It's the world of startups.
What
I
about
invested in an
like
app
real
when I was
estate
20.
wise?
What was the worst investment I made real estate wise?
Or it could be your company. It doesn't have to be you personally.
We bought a property in Flowertown that we thought we were going to build like 15 townhouses on and have like 10 apartments. And I didn't look at the zoning code well enough. And what happened was they had an existing driveway, which I was going to use to get back to the houses. And because I didn't understand the code long enough, what I didn't know is that it was grandfathered in. And when we went to build the new houses, the fire truck wasn't going to be able to get in there and turn around.
Oh, God.
So I bought it on the premise I was going to be able to put 14 houses on there, and I could put 0. I was just left with the existing building as it was.
Oh, God.
So we still own that building today, and it still makes no money.
For sentimental
And it's,
reasons.
and it was a terrible real estate deal, and it was because I didn't do enough due diligence.
That's such an
at the end of the day.
acute thing, though. Like, I mean, in the future, would you have just hired an attorney to dig through it before you purchase?
Or you just get better.
Like, what's the
at
learning?
reading,
What's
yeah.
the learning lesson there? I mean, that seems like such an acute zoning thing. I feel like I would miss that too.
Yeah, well, I think you're exactly right, which is you have to have a process that you follow, and you need people. I'm not a detail guy, right? So I'm like, the broker told me that I can get 15 houses there, right?
Done.
Done.
Where do I
Gave me a
sign?
Site plan with 15 houses on it. What could be wrong with this?
Yeah, it's drawn in Crown, but who cares?
Exactly. But what I ended up doing is get people that are more detailed than me that would never look at that deal the way that I would, and create a balancing act between, kind of Wild West guy out there just doing stuff and a real system.
Like, on your team now, you have those people.
Correct.
So do you agree with just double down on your strengths and recruit your weaknesses?
I'm always a who person, right? Like, who can solve that problem? So yes, I agree with that 100%.
What about, and you can do a personal deal too, but primarily, what do you think the best real estate deal was for you and with your, could be you or your company, and kind of walk us through why that was the best deal for you?
So I mean, we've had so many good deals. We've had such a good run because the last X number of years, 10, 15 years have been fabulous in the real estate business. It would be really difficult for me to say what I think was the best deal we did, because when we first started and we were building a temple, those were great deals because that funded our growth into 20-unit buildings and 30-unit buildings, and really helped us grow by, being able to build buildings that had so much equity in them that we could get our cash back, right? Like that's what everybody sells you on. Oh, you can build this building and get your cash back, right?
Yeah.
And, a combination of being able to build where values were going up, rents were going up, and interest rates were going down, it was pretty hard to do deals that didn't make really, really good money. So, every deal that we've done over the last 10, less the last 3 or 4 years has been one that's performed really, really well. Now we're going to see, are we good developers or are we not? Because now the market's difficult.
Yeah, now you're not getting all your money back. Are you guys, the size of deals that you're doing, like we're not able to hit 75% leverage anymore. We're now constrained on our debt coverage. So we're, 70% leverage, and we're leaving some money into some deals. Are you seeing the same thing at your size?
Yeah, look, anybody that comes to me that wants to invest money, I tell them the same thing. My number one job is to not lose your money. My number two job is to show you how to make a reasonable return off the current market conditions, okay? And so if I was giving you a 12% return on your cash 3 years ago and getting you all your money back, now I'm giving you a 7% return on your cash and you're getting a third of your money back, right? And if
this is the market we're in. It's just, yeah.
And now that's not even, now I can't even do that. Right? So now I have to come up with a different strategy of how am I going to help, what am I going to do in this market where every deal you underwrite doesn't work?
Yeah, we actually just put our first building under contract for the first time in the last 6 months this week. Got our first one. So let me just put you on the spot. If we need equity for that, because we decided anything we're doing right now, we're partnering and we're raising equity. That deal needs it's a 6-unit building, ground up construction, and it needs about $400,000 in equity. Would that even be something that you guys would look at in a partnership situation?
Yeah,
we already have it raised for this one, but on the next one, that's not too small for a partnership.
No. Look, why would I want to do that, right? I would want to do that because I go, hey, if I got a young guy that's successful, he's going to grow his business, and when he grows his business, he's going to have a bigger project, and he's going to need a partner for that bigger project. And so we always want to see people that are young in town and growing their businesses, because that creates opportunity for me.
Yeah, we come to you with the 6 unit, we'll come to you with the 60.
Exactly.
Do you have then, you mentioned raising money, do you have a lot of individual investors that invest in just your company, or is that something you would ever look to do? You mentioned or is that something where it's just deal specific, very much in terms of investing?
I'm not 100% sure I understand the question. I can tell you that our investors, we've built an investor base over 15 years of successful deal. Most of our people are high net worth individuals / people that are in country clubs that will write checks for a couple $100,000.
Yeah, that's what I was getting at. Yeah.
That's where our buyers come from. Now here's where our investors come from.
Gotcha.
And the reason that's good for me is I can get a better deal with those guys than I can if I do an institutional equity deal, right? So I look at and view institutional equity deals as you're building to sell that project from day one. Because as the developer, that's the only way you can make any money.
Because they own 80% of it, you're saying?
They own all of it. There's preferred returns.
Yeah.
You're building for fee. And then when you get to the levels, the stuff that you're building and I'm building, we're building because we want to hold on to them for cash flow. And we have investors that are comfortable with returns. They want to be able to look you in the eye and say, I know who's building for me. I know how I can get in touch with them. I don't, I'm not in a fund with BlackRock. I need to get my money out. There's
Do you
ways.
enjoy that too? You seem like a pretty personable guy. Like I like the investor relationships, the people that invest with us. It's like a fun piece of the business for me.
If I won't take an investor that I don't like.
Nice. Yeah.
Right? Because like,
It's good. You can turn people away at this point. I mean, we do that too, but we're technically too small to do that. But that we realized early on that like a bad partner will cause you more headache than not having done that deal, even if it's the best deal in the world.
That's right.
Yeah. We had some bad partners. So.
Everybody does.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Well, so we have another question we ask everyone, that is, if you were to lose your entire network and all your assets were taken from you, how would you restart today in Philadelphia?
So if I had everything taken from me and I needed to start again in Philadelphia.
Like God comes down, takes away
Yep.
your network and everything.
And your assets.
But you still know what you know now.
You still know.
Yeah, so I had a guy call me the other day and said, hey, I'm looking for somebody to come in that I can hire to be my acquisitions guy in the city of Philadelphia. And I'm going to pay him a salary, and I'm going to give him equity in deals.
Mm-hmm.
I would go take that job.
Mm-hmm.
I could do that job. And then I can help build him a lot of money, and in return, I'm going to make a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
So you take your skill set, you find someone who is doing business you respect, and then you see how you can add value to their operation.
Correct. I do have a secondary thing that I would do, which is this EOS platform that we run on. They have EOS coaches. Those coaches make like $5,000 a day to help people through that process.
Whoa.
So the coaches that are really successful at it make really good money and help people grow their businesses. And it's something that I like to do. I know the system really well. So it would be something that I would consider, is to say, hey, you know, the other thing I could do is I could help people grow their businesses in this system I believe in.
Cool.
Interesting.
Really cool.
Awesome.
Sweet. Well, that's usually how we like to end it, but this was very informative. I learned a lot, so I appreciate your time. Thanks for coming out with us.
Yeah, thanks, Gary.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Anybody that wants to listen to me, I'm happy to talk.
Love it. Beautiful.
Cool.
All right, thanks, guys.